This week we look at the first week of Pope Francis's pontificate. We find out who he met this week, and we look ahead to Holy Week. Hello and welcome to Vatican Connections. It is the first week with a brand new Pope. So, without trying, Pope Francis has captured the hearts of people all over the world, regardless of religious affiliation. The highlight of the week, of course, was the Mass for the inauguration of his Petrine ministry, which was celebrated on the feast of Saint Joseph, who is patron of the Universal Church. The Pope arrived on the back of an open-air Pope-mobile that hasn't been seen since the days of John Paul II. The Gospel was proclaimed in Greek at the Pope's own request, and his homily, although written in advance, was brief and invited all people of goodwill to be protectors of creation and to take care of each other, especially the weak and the poor.
Abbiamo ascoltato nel Vangelo
in the Gospel, we heard that Joseph did as the angel of the Lord commanded him and took Mary as his wife. These words already point to the mission that God entrusted to Joseph, that he is to be custos, the protector. Protector of who? Of Mary and Jesus. But this protection is extended to the Church. As Blessed John Paul II pointed out, just as Saint Joseph took loving care of Mary and gladly dedicated himself to Jesus Christ's upbringing, he likewise watches over and protects Christ's mystical body, the Church, of which the Virgin Mary is the exemplar and model. How does Joseph exercise this role as protector? Discreetly, humbly, silently, but with a constant presence and utter fidelity, even when he finds it hard to understand. From the time of his betrothal to Mary until the finding of the 12-year-old Jesus in the Temple of Jerusalem, he is there every moment with loving care. As the spouse of Mary, he is at her side in good times and bad, on the journey to Bethlehem for the census, and in the anxious and joyful hours when she gave birth, amid the drama of the flight into Egypt, and during the frantic search for their child in the temple, and later in the day-to-day life of the home of Nazareth, in the workshop where he taught his trade to Jesus. I would like to ask all of those who have positions of responsibility in economic, political, and social life, and all men and women of goodwill, let us be protectors of creation, protectors of God's plan inscribed in nature, protectors of one another and of the environment. Let us not allow omens of destruction and death to accompany the path of this world. But to be protectors, we also have to keep watch over ourselves. Let us not forget that hatred, envy, and pride defile us. Being protectors then also means watching over our emotions, over our hearts, because they are the seat of good and evil intentions.
e cattive,
intentions that
quelle
build
che
up
costruiscono e quelle che
and tear
distruggono.
down.
Non dobbiamo avere paura della
We must
bontà,
not be afraid
anzi
of
neanche
goodness
della tenerezza.
or even tenderness. 3 special guests were at the Mass, all special friends of the Holy Father. They were a teacher who works with troubled youth in Buenos Aires, a carton collector who leads an advocacy group for excluded workers, and a relative of the Pope who happens to be a Salesian sister. On Sunday, Pope Francis decided to celebrate Mass at the tiny parish of St. Anne in Vatican City. His homily was entirely off the cuff, no prepared text, but it resonated with viewers around the world. God never tires in forgiving us, he said. It is we who get tired of asking God for forgiveness. After the Mass, Cardinal Angelo Comastri said a few words to the Holy Father and gave us a peek at what happened inside the conclave, saying whispers went around the room when he announced his name would be Francis. Cardinal Comastri also said, in these few days we have felt the perfume of Bethlehem, the perfume of the Gospels. After Mass, he led the Angelus and did some unintentional PR for one of his cardinals. Pope Francis said he recently read a book by Cardinal Walter Casper about mercy. He said the book did him a lot of good in the recent days, and then he paused to say he wasn't trying to do PR for his cardinals. Earlier in the week, he also met with the College of Cardinals. He told the cardinals that even though most of them are seniors, their state in life is blessed with the wisdom that comes from experience, and they must share that wisdom and tranquility with the youth of today. He also informed the cardinals that Cardinal Jorge Maria Mejia had a heart attack during the conclave, and later that same afternoon, the Pope made an impromptu visit to Cardinal Mejia, who was at a nearby hospital. Now, during the meeting with the college, he personally greeted every single cardinal in attendance. Pope Francis also met with the leaders of other Christian churches and other religions who attended his inauguration. Ukrainian Catholic Metropolitan Archbishop Sviatoslav Svevchuk talked to Catholic News Service about the impact Pope Francis might have on ecumenical relations.
Pope Francis, he will be an ecumenical pope. It means that he will create this authentic but very profound relationship with everybody, and especially with our Orthodox brethren. And even the fact that the Patriarch of Constantinople will come the first time of history, and he will assist the enthronement of the new Pope means that our Pope is an ecumenical Pope, not only for the Catholics, but for all Christians. And even that fact that he was, I would say, close to the Eastern Catholics wouldn't be an obstacle to the relationship with the Orthodox. Why? Because he will be looking for the authenticity. Being in that new environment, the youngest bishop among the Catholic bishops in Argentina, it wasn't so easy for me. So I was looking for someone who can be my guide. And I was so lucky to find that person in the person of the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. And I find a man to whom was very simple to call, to talk, and to meet with, and to ask help. Well, I'm sure that we will have the Ukrainian Patriarchate, but if that will be in that pontificate, we'll see. But nevertheless, we'll work, we'll pray, And we will develop our presence worldwide in the ecumenical dimension also. Because we are conscious to being the mediators between we, East and West. I have to say that even today, we know very little about each other. So Catholics know very little about the Orthodox. And the Orthodox, very often, they do know very little about the Catholics. So this is the mission, an ecumenical mission of our Church, to bring all together. And we will collaborate with the Holy Father in this direction, in this very, very unique mission of Christ, to bring all together to be the one body in Christ, one church with one pastor.
One of the things that has endeared Pope Francis to the hearts of many is his simplicity. John Thavis spoke to CNS about some of the challenges that Pope Francis might have living out this poverty inside the Vatican.
Pope Francis is bringing a different way of being Pope to the universal church. He is the church's face of the poor. He is a man who stands with the poor. And don't forget, he has taken a vow of poverty, unlike most of the cardinals who voted and unlike previous popes, and he lives that vow of poverty. Now today, for example, Pope Francis presided over the unsealing of the papal apartments. Now, how much he'll be able to do this in this rather opulent setting of the Vatican remains to be seen, but so far he seems to be taking steps to, downplay the trappings of the papacy and be as down-to-earth as possible.
Now this week, it was only fitting to talk to someone who was on the inside during the whole papal transition, conclave, and election of the new pope. Our own Father Thomas Rosica was there for the whole thing. So the experience of being in the Sistine Chapel, what was that like?
The night before the opening of the conclave, Father Lombardi came to my room and said, "Oh, by the way, tomorrow I'd like you and Father Jill to be with me inside the Sistine Chapel for the beginning of the conclave, the entrance, the formal entrance of the cardinals." I remember going to bed that night thinking, oh my God. I'd been in the Sistine Chapel twice earlier during the construction period and then leading the television crews. But to be there for such a majestic moment was one I will never forget. First of all, I saw the chapel in all of its magnificence, its beauty, the lights. They were trying out the music, and the choir was testing out some of the hymns when we got there. So it was really spectacular. But when the moment came and you heard the cardinals coming down the hallway from the Pauline Chapel with that magnificent, haunting litany of the saints, as they came in, I was shaking. Both Father Lombardi and I and Monsignor Jill were just shaking watching this beauty. And we saw pass before us the 115 electors walking up the ramp and going to their places. And then we heard the cardinals taking their oath. And at the end of the oath, at the end of that period, there was some singing, some chanting, and then we were ushered out, and we heard the powerful words, "Extra omnes," and apparently I was one of the last people, if not the last person, out of the chapel before Monsignor Marini shut the doors.
Now you've met this man as cardinal and as pope. What's he like?
Everything we see on television these days, every image, is vintage Bergoglio. I remember when I met him in 2001, shortly after he became cardinal, and having seen him at the Eucharistic Congress in Quebec City, and then twice in the streets of Rome during this past month in Rome. He's a wonderful person. He's happy, very simple man, very joyful, and someone that, when I saw him appear, I was stunned. I didn't think that he had a chance. I thought that his chances may have been in the previous conclave. And I had flashed through my mind, I was sitting there doing the live commentary for the CBC. I had at the same time John the 23rd, the smile of John Paul I, that timidity. I saw the boldness of addressing the crowd and linking with them of John Paul II. And of course, I never imagined in my lifetime that a pontificate would begin not with Sia Laudato Gesù Cristo, but Buonasera, good evening. And I think at that moment he won people over. And then the very profound gesture of asking the people to pray over him and bless him before he extended his apostolic blessing. And it was a very beautiful moment. The crowd that had been really raucous up until that point, there was dead silence, 200,000 people, dead silence in that cold, miserable, rainy night, as it seemed the world was praying over this man. And he bonded with them. He connected with them from the get-go.
What lies ahead for our church?
I think if there's any indication, the past 10 days have been any indication, we're in for one heck of a ride. We have a pastor who's speaking to people's hearts, who's reaching out in every possible direction. He's not bound to protocol. He's a threat to the Vatican security and not the other way around. He's spontaneous, he's joyful, he's simple, and he's getting to the heart of the matter. He's getting to the heart of things. And I think this message is reaching out far beyond the Catholic Church. I watched in dealing with the thousands of media who were directly reporting to me. They were stunned. They couldn't get over this. Many were in laughter, many were in tears. And I think those were the two emotions that kind of took over in Rome from that Wednesday night. And we saw the different scenes of, pulling up to the Casa del Clero, the Casa Paulo VI, to pay the bill and to pack his luggage. We saw the different scenes of him on Sunday celebrating Mass at St. Anne's Parish Church and breaking all protocol and going outside to greet people, as some of the Italians said, questo è un parroco americano, American pastor. This is the role of any pastor who wants to connect with the people. And the warmth of greeting. And I remember when I greeted him in the audience hall on Saturday, he recognized me right away because we had just been together on the street a few days before. And those arms extended. It was a wonderful moment. And then the embrace. I didn't expect to be embracing or being embraced by a Roman pontiff. But this isn't an ordinary Roman pontiff.
The Holy Father had a whirlwind first week, sneaking in unexpected meetings, including the visit to Cardinal Mejia in a nearby hospital and an audience with Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, and of course, with the Superior General of the Jesuits. Father Adolfo Nicolas, who heads the Jesuit order, wrote a letter to all Jesuits about that meeting. He said it was warm and casual, and it began and ended with the traditional Jesuit embrace. He said he told the Holy Father that the Jesuits are at his service and invited him to stop by the General House for lunch sometime. Now, the week ahead will be just as busy. It's, of course, Holy Week, and Pope Francis is scheduled to preside at all Holy Week liturgies, and he's doing something new. Holy Thursday. First, we heard that he was sending 3,000 tickets for the Mass of the Lord's Supper to Caritas and the Sant'Egidio community to distribute among the people that they help. Then, a change of plans was announced. Pope Francis will celebrate the Mass of the Lord's Supper at a Roman jail for young offenders. Now, in Buenos Aires, Cardinal Bergoglio did this every Holy Thursday. Now that the initial excitement of having a new pope has started to die down a little bit, everyone has questions about this new pope, the decisions that he's making, about his papacy, and a whole host of other things. So, Daniel E. Merrick asks, can you tell us more about the cross Pope Francis was wearing on the night he was elected? Well, the pectoral cross he was wearing and is still wearing is the same cross he has been wearing for the last 15 years as Archbishop of Buenos Aires. It is made of iron, and he was given the option of using a new gold cross, but he chose to keep his own. The one he wears is a crucifix with an engraving of Christ on the cross with the Holy Spirit descending upon him. Leslie Guillet asks if there are changes to the Curia that are going to take place, when will they be made, and when would his first international trip take place? Well, Leslie, this Pope is full of surprises, but we do have some indication about both of these things. So he recently confirmed all the heads of Vatican departments in their positions for the time being. The Holy See has informed us that Pope Francis has said he wants some time to reflect and discern before he makes any permanent changes to the Curia. Now, regarding his international voyages, the president of Brazil told media that Pope Francis confirmed with her he will go to World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro this July. He also told Ms. Rousseff that he wants to visit Aparecida after World Youth Day. It is believed that he could add Argentina to his itinerary for the Brazil trip, But that's just speculation for now. Then again, this Pope could easily decide to make some other trip before July. Vatican Connections is interactive. Send us your questions or comments by Facebook, Twitter, email, or post. Via email, send comments to info@saltandlighttv.org, and by post, send letters to 114 Richmond Street East, Toronto, Ontario, M5C 1P1, Canada. On this week's Roman Profile, we'll look at some of the symbols of the papacy and the few trappings of the position that Pope Francis has kept. At the inauguration of his Petrine ministry, Pope Francis received the pallium, a woolen band worn over the shoulders. It symbolizes the bishop as the Good Shepherd, and at the same time is a reminder of the Lamb of God crucified. The papal pallium is similar to that of a metropolitan archbishop, but the Pope's is wider and the 6 crosses are red instead of black. The other symbol of the Pope's position is the fisherman's ring. It bears an image of St. Peter to remind the Pope of his role as successor of a humble fisherman. Pope Francis chose a ring that was designed for Pope Paul VI, but never worn. It has an image of St. Peter holding keys. Pope Francis has done away with some symbols associated with the Pope. He kept his own black shoes instead of the traditional red papal loafers. The red shoes most likely come from Roman times, when red footwear meant the wearer was an aristocrat. The emperor wore red shoes, and he was also considered the high priest. This tradition passed along to the Roman pontiffs. Pope Francis, however, stuck with his own perfectly good black tie-ups, a gift from friends the day before he left Buenos Aires. His old shoes were reportedly rather shabby, and his friend gave him a new pair for the conclave. Pope Francis also took a pass on the red mozzetta, or cape, that is also a throwback to Roman history. Well, that's it for Vatican Connections. Now, next week, Salt and Light will bring you full coverage of all the Holy Week events from Rome. From everyone here, thank you for watching.